After my last Pacifist run, I got a request to do one for Super Mario 3D Land, but unfortunately I was having trouble recording the footage on my DS and I couldn't get a decent emulator running, so I went with 3D World instead. I hope that's okay. The rules here are pretty self-explanatory. We have to avoid harming any enemy that comes our way. I'll be playing as Mario throughout this challenge, but we are allowed to switch characters if needed. Also, I would like to point out that all the footage used in this video was recorded after I completed the challenge. My computer only has so much memory, so I figured it'd just be easiest for me to go back and get the footage afterwards. This is the case for all my challenges, but I figured it was important to mention it this time since the lives counter and the fact that every level has been completed might give it away. If you don't believe that I've actually completed this challenge because of this, listen to everything I say in this video, do it yourself, and I guarantee you'll have the same experience. Without further ado, let's get on to the video. Starting off with 1-1, there's nothing to worry about here. Shocker, I know. 1-2 also isn't bad, but right after this is 1-A where you are forced to harm 2 charging chucks to complete the level. So to avoid this, we're going to take the secret exit in 1-2 to skip right to World 2. 2-1 isn't bad at all. For the first time of many times throughout this challenge, we're presented with 2 different levels to choose from. However, because we skipped a world to get here, we don't have enough green stars to play 2-2, so 2-3 it is. 2-3 has plenty of piranha plants you can grab to eat enemies, but we're gonna leave them just because we don't want to have one of them accidentally eat an enemy. There is also a section where we have to damage boost through a mega piranha plant, but otherwise this level's a complete breeze. 2-4 was also a breeze to get through. Unfortunately, we're forced to harm our first enemies in 2-A, where we have to take out 3 Mega Goombas in order to beat this level, and there's no way to skip it. And right after this, we're forced to harm a Fire Bro in 2-5 to summon a pipe. It's beneficial to ignore the double cherries in 2-5 so that you don't accidentally kill one of the enemies with one of your clones. Our violent streak continues in Bowser's Bullet Bill Brigade, where we have to harm Boom Boom to complete the level. You will want to avoid the cannon boxes as well so that you don't accidentally shoot the heads off one of your enemies. And with that, we're on to World 3. 3-1 puts an end to our violent streak thankfully, as we can complete this level with ease. We don't have enough green stars to play 3-2, so we'll play 3-3 instead. 3-3 plays the exact same, as the only enemies you face are boos, who can't be harmed anyway. Next up, I went on to play our first Captain Toad level, which wasn't too eventful. 3-4 was easy, but 3-A forces us to harm 3 Magic Koopas and we're unable to skip this level. Thankfully, 3-5 and 3-6 are fairly easy as long as you're careful. You have to be cautious with your timing when switching the tracks in 3-7 so you don't kill these orange hot dogs. As you'd expect, we have to harm Pom Pom in the Bullet Bill Express. But fortunately, right after this, we can kiss World 3 goodbye and head right on to... oh no. Before we can enter World 4, we have to play 3-B, where we're forced to harm Histocrat. And of course, there's no way to skip this level. Also, the deaths of the mini Histocrats aren't directly caused by Mario, meaning that they aren't our fault. Histocrat's death does count, however, because we were the ones who harmed him directly. This will apply to all situations like this going forward, so before you go to the comments saying I forgot to count a bunch of deaths, keep that in mind. Now we can move on to World 4. 4-1 is pretty easy with nothing much to say. In 4-2, there's a couple piranha creepers that get in our way. These 2 specifically. Thankfully, you can damage boost through this one, but to make it through this pipe, you have to kill this one. Once again, we'll be taking the secret exit to avoid harming any of the boss fights in World 4. Doing this lets us skip directly to World 5. I started off by trying the Captain Toad level for this world. It wasn't too bad, but you have to be careful not to look at the ghost for too long or the light will send them to the super afterlife, I guess. Moving on to the actual levels in this world, 5-1 and 5-2 start off really light with nothing too difficult to talk about. But 5-A slaps us in our pacifist faces by making us harm 5 charging chucks. 5! Oh well, not like we can really do anything about it. We also have our first opportunity to choose between 2 different levels, 5-5 and 5-6. Whenever we come across forks in the road, I'll just play through both levels and mention if there's anything noteworthy. Thankfully, the rest of World 5 is a piece of cake with none of the levels really getting in our way, except of course 5-Castle where we have to harm King Kathunk. We can now head up to the sky to World 6. World 6 as a whole is actually pretty easy. The only level worth mentioning is 6-2 because we have to harm 2 bullies to summon a warp box. And of course, there's the boss levels where we have to harm Prince Bully, Boom Boom, and Motley Boss Blob before we can head to World Castle. In the Motley Boss Blob fight, you'll have to avoid the blobs that appear after Motley Boss Blob crashes into the floor. This is a lot easier if you have a Tanuki Leaf and don't grab any of the double cherries. With that, we can now head on to World Castle. Starting off with Castle Dash 1, things aren't looking too good for us here. The level wants us to kill a Fire Bro at 2 separate sections to move on. I thought we were going to have to add them to the kill count, but using Peach and a Tanuki Leaf, we can just barely make it to the rest of the level. You have no idea how good the adrenaline rush from doing this twice felt. Castle Dash 2 and Castle Dash 3 were easy. Now, if you have an issue with the enemies poofing out of existence in Castle Dash 2, Castle Dash 3 can be completed instead as it doesn't even have any enemies. Once again, we have to use all reliable Peach and a Tanuki Leaf to make it past another scary jump in Castle Dash 4. After this, we have to choose between Castle Dash A and Castle Dash B, both of which include defeating a boss. I went with Castle Dash B because we'd only have to harm Prince Bully, whereas in Castle Dash A, we'd have to harm several of these boulder guys. Upon completing Castle Dash B, we're confronted with Castle Dash 6, which is pretty easy. Then we have Castle Dash 7, which isn't too bad, but you will have to be careful around these flying dry bones. Now, we can head on to Castle Dash Castle. If you didn't need 130 green stars to enter the level. Up until this point, I had only been grabbing the green stars that have been right in front of me. I forgot how many you need to beat the game, so I had to start going back to levels I'd already beaten to collect as many green stars as possible. Most of them weren't too bad, as all I had to do was just go slightly out of my way to get them. But occasionally, there was one I knew had to be possible that I challenged myself to go for. The first of these occurred in 1-2 with this Goomba stack. The most effective way to get this was to use Peach and very carefully float your way toward the green star. The next of these green stars is in Bowser's Bullet Bill Brigade. If you wear one of the cannon heads and keep it until the end of the level, you can destroy this wall to reveal the star behind it. The challenge here is avoiding shooting the enemies with a cannon, but as long as you're cautious, you'll be fine. Bowser's Bullet Bill Express has a green star you can nab too. This one's a little controversial since you have to hope the Cat Bullet Bills kill the Goomba Tower so that you can reach the star, but technically these deaths aren't caused by Mario, so I say it's fine. There's one in 5-7 where you're supposed to use one of these spring things to reach the green star, but that involves harming them. Thankfully, we can reach it by connecting another Joy-Con to the game. There are also a few cloud sections where you're supposed to use a star to obliterate a bunch of enemies before collecting a green star, but all these can be completed peacefully by simply staying out of the enemy's way. Then, to nab a few extra green stars, I went back to previous worlds to unlock levels we originally didn't have enough green stars for. I went back to 1-Captain Toad, 2-2, 3-2, 5-3, and 6-3. We can take this pipe from World 5 to 1-Captain Toad to get 5 whole green stars. We're also able to complete the other levels with minimal difficulty. After all that, I had a total of 129 green stars. We were 1 away. I was determined to get that last green star without harming an enemy. So I went back to every level I had played without collecting every green star to see if there were any that might be possible. And it started to seem like all hope was lost. Until I went back to 4-2. When I had initially entered this mystery box, I saw the Piranha Creepers and immediately assumed reaching the green star would be impossible without stomping on the Piranha Creepers. But I was forgetting about one critical power-up in this game, the Cat Bell. With the Cat Bell, we can climb the wall behind the Piranha Creepers and reach the green star without harming a single one. This brings us up to the 130 green stars needed to play Castle Dash Castle without harming any extra enemies. Castle Dash Castle, what a weird name, doesn't pose a ton of trouble towards us, but again we have to go back to the girl boss, Tanuki Peach, to get across another gap that's supposed to be cleared using a warp box that's summoned after killing these enemies. Afterwards, we have to harm the King of the Koopas in an intense battle before we can head on to World Bowser. The first 3 levels in World Bowser aren't too bad. I was making sure to collect every green star possible this time around to avoid having to backtrack later on. Bowser Dash Train is the first level in this world where we have to harm an enemy, and that enemy is Pom Pom. Moving on to Bowser Dash 4, we just have to be cautious around the flying dry bones, which admittedly is easier said than done. But after a few tries, you'll be all set. Bowser Dash 5 is definitely on the easier side. All you have to do is steer clear of these blue fish things, and you'll be home free. Continuing on to Bowser Dash 6, which in my opinion is one of the hardest levels in this challenge. We have to be extremely careful around the flying dry bones, especially in this section. I hate this section. Just look at it. But thankfully, Bowser Dash 7 doesn't have anything worth mentioning. Sadly, before we can enter the final level, we have to harm Motley Boss Blob again in Bowser Dash A, and Histocrat again in Bowser Dash B. And we need to collect 170 green stars. At this point, I had 159 green stars. I had already collected all the green stars possible from World Bowser and from all the levels I had already played, so there was no way around it. I was gonna have to harm more enemies. I decided the best way to harm as few enemies as possible was to play through the levels in World 1. I played through 1-A and beat the 2 Charging Chucks to open the path to the rest of the world. I avoided collecting this green star in 1-3 because this POW block kills this Piranha Plant when you try to enter the pipe. I did have to harm this Mega Piranha Plant though to make it to the end of the level. Next, I collected all the green stars in 1-4 and 1-5 with ease. Once again, just a gentle reminder that because we did not directly harm these enemies, their poofing out of existence is not our fault. Lastly, I got the last of the green stars necessary in 1-Castle at the cost of harming Bowser. Finally, we're about to play the final level in the game. It wasn't too bad, but to be honest, I wasn't sure whether to count all these Meowsers since we don't actually witness them die. But then again, their deaths are sort of implied, so I don't really know what to do. I think ultimately, since the main Meowser was the only one we directly harmed, his is the only death that should count as being our fault. And there you have it. The minimum amount of enemies required to be harmed is 32 enemies in order to beat Super Mario 3D World. But hey, maybe it's less than that. If any of you have any ways to avoid harming any of these enemies, let me know down below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing as it really helps the channel grow and it truly does mean more than you know. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video, but until then, keep being awesome Nintendo fans.